Yes. All right, Commissioner Bill Reseg.
Perfect. Here.
Nice. Commissioner Nikki Seegers.
Present.
Okay, Commissioner Leah Stagg. Commissioner Terry Henderson. All right, Commissioner Pamela Hortsmeyer. All right, Commissioner Amber Sanchez. And Commissioner Walt Craig. Thank you. And we have a quorum.
All right, we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have the approval of minutes from July 23rd's meeting. Discussion and possible action.
You could ask for. How do we do that? Yeah. You could ask for a motion.
Oh, can I get a motion?
So, make a motion to approve the minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Consideration of public comments. Those wishing to address the commission should fill out request forms in advance. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. The commission may not respond to speakers during the call to public. The commission may direct staff to study the matter or request the matter be placed on a future agenda.
I did not get any comments from the public.
Thank you. New business, election of chair and vice chair.
Commissioner Seegers, this is going to be tabled for the next meeting in
Okay.
January.
Okay, thank you. The introduction of Walt Craig. Introduction of new commissioner. Is this also going to be tabled or are we moving? Okay. Introduction of Commissioner Walt Craig.
That's me.
Hello.
Hello. Part of the reason I joined the Historical Preservation Commission was to be sure that I preserved myself. At 82, I am not a young person, but I have been around a lot, and I have seen a lot of what history can do for a
Walt,
community.
I'm sorry, can you speak into the microphone?
Yes,
Thank you.
probably be easier if I... Do I need to hold the button?
Nope, press it again. Green means you're on.
Okay, now we're ready to go?
Nope, you're on.
Good. No,
Yep.
he said-
Hit it again. There you go.
Ah. Okay, now I know. No, this one works. This one is working. Okay, thank you. All right. Anyway, I have traveled a great deal and seen a lot of historical places, a lot of places where they have made history work for a tourist attraction, and that is something we are trying to accomplish here in Kingman. And so that's why I asked to join the commission. And fortunately, for whatever reason, they decided to accept me.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, we have reports. City Clerk review of open meeting laws and parliamentary procedures.
I am not the city clerk. I am the city attorney. I am gonna do this because Annie wants me to train more. This one. Share. Trying to make sure I do this right. Now what? Share. Right?
I don't know what happened.
I messed it up. See, I failed in my training.
I'm gonna pop in really quick.
See what happens?
Something happened with the thing. There we go.
Awesome. So basically what we're trying to do is just talk a little bit about open meeting law. The open meeting law is there's some statutes that Arizona has talking about public meetings and public officials and what you can and can't do to conduct the public's business. So basically, as you see, I don't want to read this to you because you all can read. You have, I assume you guys all have these presentations in your packet. But basically, again, it's saying anything that, that the public's business is what's going to be on the agenda, has to be done in public. You can't hang out at the local restaurant and talk business. It's transparency. We want to make sure that the public, the folks, our citizens know what we're talking about. We're not making decisions behind closed doors. So you are a public body. You've been appointed to these commissions. You're now subject to these open meeting laws as it is related to the topics that would come before this commission. So you guys can hang out, talk about social things, anything basically but what would be considered this heritage preservation type of issues. And obviously, as it says, anybody can show up, anybody gets to listen. If they want to audio tape, videotape, they can do that. So public is open to everybody unless it's an executive session, but you guys don't do executive sessions. As I said earlier, protects the people's right to participate in the government. Integrity, builds integrity and maintains integrity, informs citizenry. And like I say, it builds that level of trust because, well, you may not always take, I want to say you'll take into consideration people's input, but you may not always agree with their input. But that's okay, at least someone gets to provide input. You're using your knowledge, the information's provided you to make those decisions, those recommendations. So we know it applies to you. This is the statute defining how you're fit as a commission person. A quasi-judicial body, again, you're not a quasi-judicial body, but that's a body that makes legal decisions. If someone's appealing a decision from Sean's department or something along that line, they get to appeal to the Board of Adjustment or the Board of Appeals, and that's something that can be further appealed to the Superior Court. So this is what is a meeting. This is the technical legal description of it, and basically it's a gathering, however you're gathering, in person, by email, text, that's a gathering, and in which point you discuss, propose, or take legal action. Quorum is 4 of you. You have a seven-member body. It's the majority, which is 4. So, as describing that, if I'm not recommending 3 of you get together and talk business, but you could. If you do that, none of the 3 of you can talk to somebody else because then you've created a quorum and you violate the open meeting law. Already talked about that. Oh, let me go back to this. If there's a vacant position, that doesn't mean the quorum requirement goes down. That's the total body size. And as you can see here, these are the various ways that you can meet technologically. It's pretty self-explanatory. Be careful sending emails. Again, because emails can be forwarded to multiple people. Don't reply all. So if you get an email from someone on city staff, if you have to reply, just reply to that individual. Don't do reply all, because you could say, you know, hey, I'm going to support this position. Reply all. Now everybody's in this discussion. Splintering the quorum is kind of what I talked about earlier, is separating yourselves out so you don't have the full quorum in person, but you're meeting sequentially. Again, avoid that. All public meetings, so when we post the agenda, has to be at least 24 hours in advance. Sometimes you see these meetings maybe get canceled for some reason because there was a posting problem. 24 hours. If we got 24 hours, we can take care of it. Less than 24, we can't. So the agenda is what you're going to talk about, and you're only going to talk about what's on the agenda. So whoever's the chairperson, the vice chair, you got to make sure that discussion is on the topic at hand. The recording secretary and some of the staff, if they need to jump in, they can jump in and say, hey, we're kind of getting off topic a little bit. You see me do it at council meetings on occasion, because Smiley really likes to go off agenda all the time, so I'm kidding. But it's, the agenda is the notice, date and time, location of the meeting. It'll be the specific matters to be discussed, so that's what the agenda topic. We don't need to get into a lot of this. This is handled by the staff. You guys don't generally handle that kind of stuff, but just remember, if what the wording says on the agenda, all of you should remember, just stick to that topic. If you want to go beyond that, then we have to look at maybe doing it at another meeting. Sometimes you can deviate a little bit tangentially, but make sure you can all tie it all in together. The bold, if it's not on the agenda, you can't talk about it. If it's not properly noticed, it's null and void. If you make, you guys aren't going to be taking what's called legal action or making an absolute decision that means we're going to act on it. That means you've approved something. So the going null and void really doesn't matter, but it can still be a violation. The AG's office can still investigate. We just want to avoid that, try and make sure we have the agenda properly done and we stay on topic. And ask me if you have any questions. And speaking of asking me if you have any questions, if you have any questions prior to the meeting, any point in time, always call staff, call me, call Annie, recording staff. We're always here to help. We want to make sure if you have maybe even a difficult question, you can still ask it at the meeting, but sometimes it's good to ask us beforehand. That way we can research the topic and make sure we have an answer. Because there's times when, you know, there's a question out of the blue that we don't know the answer. And instead of wasting time, ask if you think it's off, kind of out in the wild somewhere. But that way we can research it. We don't have to wait till another meeting to get the answer. It just kind of helps move things along. The call of the public, people get confused about the call to the public. It's where people can come up and make a statement regarding the Heritage Preservation Commission or the jurisdictional issues that you guys have. Again, it's not required, but we always allow it. That input cannot be responded to by statute because that again becomes a discussion that's not on the agenda. So as you see in the agenda, it says it can be dealt with by staff or brought back at another meeting. So if you feel you have to respond on a call to the public, you can only do it if it's criticism. Someone's just calling you out for something, and you can only do it after the call to the public has been closed. I would suggest you don't bother because you're just engaging. They're going to come back the next meeting and say something. Just, you got to have thick skin when you're at a board or commission on the city council. Just let it go. And again, these are the things the staff can look at it to be put back on another agenda. But you just sit there and listen. The chair can say, you know, thanks for the input, and we'll move on. So I said earlier, the public has a right to attend, listen, tape, record, videotape. They don't have a right to speak unless it's a public hearing or we invite them up to speak, but you can always terminate that depending on the situation. They don't have the right to be disruptive. This is not something that I would be too concerned about, but there's always sanctions for violating the open meeting law. If you knowingly do it, you could be removed from your office, could be an order to pay attorney's fees. Anything that was done is null and void. I've never heard of this happening in any kind of commission, especially when it's not like the Planning and Zoning Commission, which has a very specific legal role. What happens if there's an open meeting law violation is someone will complain about it, send a letter to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General will call me, say, hey, this happened. Then what I do is look at it, and I will generally do what's called remedial training, which means I would come back to whoever it is, the board or commission, and do some more training like this, just to make sure we don't let that happen again. we let the AG's office know, and they're good to go. They don't want to punish people, they just want to educate people. So there's a conflict of interest. It seems like a dirty word, it's not a dirty word. It's just means you have an involvement in something. So it's much more pertinent when there's legal decisions being made. But if there is a project that you own, you're working on, that comes before this body, I would suggest you say, I have a conflict and I'm not going to participate in that discussion. Then what you just need to do is step down from the podium or dais. You can go back in the back room. The clerk will have some paper for you to fill out. Basically, it's just going to say, I have a conflict of interest. I own this property. My family owns this property, whatever it is. You just explain it and you just step out and don't participate. Very simple. If there's a violation, a knowing and intelligent violation of the conflict of interest statute, it can be a felony. So you want to avoid that kind of thing. Again, as I say, that really hits a lot on council decisions, planning and zoning, board of adjustment, board of appeals, because they're making very specific legal decisions that are actionable. Your group is really going to be an advisory policy kind of group, so it shouldn't be a big problem. But if you think you have an issue, call me, call Annie. We'll talk about it and see what we need to do. And best bet is always just say, hey, I may have a problem. I'm just going to step out. So it's defining the relationship. So you or an immediate relative, and that means parents, brothers, sisters, I think in-laws, that have ownership or partial ownership in something. There's a big statutory definition of what that all is. I'm not going to put that all in here. Like I say, we can talk about that if you come to that issue. Just if you think you have a conflict, just give us a call. You're not selling anything, so it's really not to worry about that. And then what happens is if there's a potential conflict of interest, there's a series of exemptions called remote interest. Again, there's something like 10 or 11. We will walk through that definition to see if that was something that would apply to you folks. And it's partial interests, different relationships. I don't want to go into it because it's very time consuming. And it's something we can do privately if we reach that situation. And again, staff doesn't know what you guys own, what your family's doing, so we're not going to know if you have a conflict. You're the only ones that are going to know that you may have some relationship to some project. So just think about it and give us a holler. We'll help. Those are the specific statutes. If you ever want to read about it, we can always get you more information if you want more. Please contact my office or Annie's office. So that's that. Any questions on that really brief, fast background? Nothing? All right. See if I can get this one. Oops. There we go. So parliamentary procedure, that's how you conduct your meeting. And I really need to update this slideshow because it kind of goes a little more in depth than we really look at. Whereas these meetings are formal, if you look at the bulk of a lot of other meetings, they're pretty informal. We try to make sure that everybody gets to talk. We don't follow Robert's Rules of Order. If anybody knows about Robert's Rules of Order, it's a Byzantine maze of different things that just make it very convoluted to actually get anything done as far as I'm concerned. So the big thing is, we know why it's important. This is the standard flow of the meeting. I'll talk about motions and such. We know call to order, roll call, pledge of allegiance. I'm not going to do this. You know what the agenda looks like. You don't need me to babysit you through that. So motion. So as we said earlier, we want to ask for motion to approve things, move along. The chair can always ask for a motion. That helps move things along a little bit, or ask for discussion. Your motion basically is I want to approve it, I want to table something, I want to do something. A subsidiary motion is maybe you're modifying it, or you're trying to do something outside the normal scope of the procedure. We don't really get into those. That's why I really want to adjust this, and I always think I want to fix it every time I give this presentation, and I never do it. So Standard things with a motion. Make a motion, second it, debate, have that additional discussion, then you vote. Now, when you look at a lot of places, you can't have that discussion prior to the motion. We do the discussion before. It just makes more sense. It allows a free-flow discussion. You don't want to have a motion to approve or disapprove something and then have a discussion that may change what you want that motion to be, which is kind of what Robert's Rules does. So we do it a little bit differently. I think most governments do a lot of it differently. Discuss it, make your motion. If you have to have any additional discussion, good to go. We always want discussion. So the big thing you want to remember is whoever the chairperson is, they're running the meeting. Just make sure before you talk, you get the nod from the chairperson. Just as it says, ask Mr. Chairman, chairperson, wait till you recognize, state whatever you want to state, make your motion. As it says, try to keep it on point, avoid, as it says, bringing personalities into the discussion. We really don't want to focus on putting somebody down and making arguments. We just want to move the topic along. Wait to see if you get second. No one seconds the motion, it fails. So once you get a second, then you can have your vote or additional discussion. Already says that. Chairperson, always restate the motion. Always make sure your motions are clear. Because sometimes they're just say, yeah, I move to approve. Okay, but sometimes there's going to be additional points to it. I move to approve this with a couple conditions. We just want to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about so we know what we're voting on, and the recording secretary knows what's happening. I know on occasion there's been some confusions on motions and other commissions. Be really clear, make sure you restate the motion. The recording secretary, if they don't know, they should speak up and say, hey, we're not sure what's going on here. We just want to make sure it's clear. Again, I don't want to go too deep into this. If you have a motion already on the table, in some reason you want to amend that motion, you can amend it and add things to it. But if you do that, that's a secondary process. So then you're going to make that motion to amend it. You vote on that aspect before you get to your main motion. We generally try to avoid that a lot because it becomes very complicated about people knowing what we're doing. Because if we're amending a motion here and it passes or fails, sometimes that main motion we get a little confused with. So if you have some concerns over the clarity of the motion, sometimes it's good just to start all over, just saying, do you withdraw that motion? Let's redo it. It's clarity. I think we all want clarity. Different ways. We don't do by division. That's usually for big groups. Motion to table. Again, we don't necessarily do the specific Robert's Rules of Order motion. If we want to table it, we can say, hey, we're going to motion to table it for 30 days. Or we're just going to say postpone indefinitely. If you want to go for that, you definitely can. I move that this is, well, I'm trying to think some other options. Table, and I'm not a huge fan of giving too much of a timeline to it because sometimes you can't get it back in that time frame. But you guys, because you're set so far apart with your meetings, you can always say to the next meeting instead of 30 days. Yeah, I don't think there's much to say on that. That's it. And that comes from Robert's Rules of Order. I have some more information that I've been trying to dig up to make a boards and commissions handbook that will be very specific to you folks. It's just another one of those projects that are sitting on my desk that I haven't gotten to. But this is a very on-the-fly type of discussion around motions and parliamentary procedure. Any questions? Clear as mud. And like I say, just be informal. It's okay. Just make sure there's decorum and everybody speaks at one time, because you got the recording secretary has to be able to hear what's being said, and the folks in the back. Always use your microphones, because that's one of the biggest complaints we get at these meetings is people can't hear. When there's more people, it's harder to hear back there. And we do have sometimes a little bit older folks like me that just can't hear well. And with the fans going and talking in the back, it's tough to hear. So just make sure you use microphones and talk loud. And they're very directional. If you get too far, which is what I was doing, you don't necessarily get picked up. So I think that's it. Questions? Bill? Looks like you got a question. No? No questions. All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
We now have a guest speaker, Sean Osterman from the City of Kingman Development Services Department will present on the existing Kingman Historic Overlay District. This is for informational purposes only, possible discussion.
Good afternoon. How is everybody? Good, I hope. I gotta remember how to do this. Sean, do you want me to send it out? Yes, absolutely. All right, so for some of you may know me, some of you may not. So previously, the Heritage Preservation Commission was under Development Services. There's been a lot of change when it comes to development services. We weren't actually development services like we are now. We were community development. The Economic Development Department has taken over the Heritage Preservation Commission, as they're the ones that are involved in some of the projects and some of the things that we're looking to do and have been looking to do to preserve the history and heritage of the city. So they've asked Development Services to come in and kind of give you guys an overview of a couple of things of what our current historical overlay district is, and what the historical preservation officer is and what their duties are. So we're still kind of trying to work out some of the semantics on who really is going to be handling what with economic development taking over this commission. We kind of have preliminarily, to some degree, decided that we're kind of gonna work together until we really get something into play. The reason why I'm here is our current director had a previous appointment for today. This meeting, of course, was moved from the evening to the daytime, and so he's in an appointment and out today. But I actually served as a historical or the Heritage Preservation Officer previous to the new director coming into play. So that's why I get to be here. So hello, how are you? At any rate, so I think there's been some question on what actually historical overlay district is, right? So essentially, to kind of give you a description of what it is, which this will all make sense in just a minute, but the south 1/2 block from North First Street to the west side of North 4th Street to the southwest corner of Andy Devine Avenue, which is also known as Route 66, to the east to include the train depot, south to Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway, and then west to include the powerhouse property. So that's just a bunch of jargon. I don't know about you, but that doesn't really make sense to me. It took me a long time to write that out. But hopefully these maps and these drawings will kind of help to show you where it is. So essentially everything inside of the blue line is our current historical overlay district. I kind of tried to find some history on how the historical overlay came into play, and there really isn't a lot of written history on what it is, on how it came about, right? So essentially, back in 1984, the city had they called it the Kingman Multiple Resource Area Survey. And basically what that is in 1984, they had somebody come in and they did a survey, or maybe the city did the survey. I'm not sure who or how that came about. But basically, back in 1984, this district was formed as having a large amount of history for the creation and the establishment of the city of Kingman. So probably could have found a lot more, but bottom line here is 1984 was right about when this district was formed. There have been previous plans to expand this district and everything else, but that's not something as a city we're going to be able to do. That's something we're going to have to hire a firm to come in and do because we are going to do it for the entire city. All right, it would be throughout the entire city, and this will be any landmarks, anything, you know, we've expanded this from just being the historical, what it used to be called, the Historical Preservation Commission, to now the Heritage. And what that does basically is it's designed to protect and enhance any cultural, historical, and archaeological heritage of the city by recognizing, preserving, enhancing, perpetuating the use of any objects, structures, sites, and landscape features that represent distinctive elements of the city's culture, political, architectural, and archaeological history. Right? So that's to me, and it may mean something different to you, to me what this means is basically anything within our city that has had a very large influence upon our foundation, what we were formed on, and how we continue to do business and move within our city. So we're wanting to preserve that. Any questions about the historical overlay district itself? No questions? And yes, right, and that's part of why some of these changes have been made, is because it comes down to staffing, and I don't want to say, you know, that this isn't something that's high priority, because it's very high priority. But the idea behind this is to where it's not just one department that is trying to spearhead everything. It's, you know, multiple departments. We've had discussions that Development Services is going to be involved with a lot of this stuff anyway, because we have to be, because of the, you know, planning and zoning codes and things like that that are in place. So we're looking at hopefully converging and working together in order to move some of these things along and move some of these things forward. That because I'm sure members of the commission have ideas. I'm sure staff has ideas and different things of what we can do. We're trying to get things to where we can move forward and hopefully get some projects and things going. So next comes the Historical Preservation Officer and what their duties are. So essentially, the Director of Development Services is who has traditionally served, most likely will continue to serve until, you know, obviously we kind of get the ball rolling here, and kind of what their duties are. So they're supposed to develop and direct all heritage preservation projects, activities, and investigations. Again, that's something that economic development is in which includes tourism and things like that, is going to have a heck of a lot to do with. So again, it'd be a joint thing where we're all working together. Conduct as needing an ongoing survey to identify objects, structures, natural features. Essentially what I said before on what it is we're wanting to preserve. So we'll be moving forward with some of those things. They're to provide technical assistance and make professional recommendations on preservation matters that are brought to the Heritage Preservation Commission, any other commissions, or to the council. So essentially, again, that's kind of going to be a joint thing of all of us. Maybe one certain person that's doing the presenting and things like that. That's something that we're all going to kind of have a part of, kind of divvying up some of the tasks and trying to make some of the things happen. Make recommendations to the Heritage Preservation Commission on the designation of cultural resources and landmarks or as a historical zone. Serve as the liaison between the city and the state historic preservation officer and other government and non-government agencies in all matters pertaining to the heritage preservation. Serve as the liaison between the Heritage Preservation Commission and the public, property owners, and other staff, other city staff. the council and other government and non-government agencies and all matters pertaining to heritage preservation. Again, as we're reading and going through this stuff, these are all things that we're needing to and wanting to work out. But as it is right now, this is how it is, and as we move forward, some of the stuff may change and some of the responsibilities may change, but that's to be continued into the future and after we kind of get some footing here with what we're doing. In addition to all other development standards provided in the zoning code, compliance with the requirements of this section and review and approval pursuant to this section are required for the following things. So anytime it is chosen that a designation of historical overlay zones or landmarks or properties is done, that's something that is done. We have to do that in compliance with not only our city ordinances, but also our state statutes. Development of property within the historical overlay zone or a landmark property. So anytime anything's going to be changed with those, the outside aesthetics or anything with that, that comes to obviously development services because most times permits are required for that. It's at that point in time when we decide, okay, is this something that does need to go before the commission to be discussed? Or is this something that really isn't going to affect anything that we're trying to preserve or that we're trying to do, right? So that is part of the duties here is when something that's within the historical overlay district comes in, we have to evaluate, okay, what is the project that's going to be occurring here, and is this something that needs to be discussed? And I'll go a little bit further into that on what that really means, but let's get through this first. Any cultural resource studies, and then, so here's the other part, basically, is compliance with the requirements of this section are not required in these following situations. So number one is work that the building official certifies as correcting an imminent hazard for which no temporary corrective measure will suffice in protecting the public safety. So for instance, what that means is I am currently the building official. So if I come in there and say, hey, do you know what, this has to be done and this has to be done now, it's gonna happen, right? Because the safety of the public is our number one thing, right? So obviously in doing that, we're going to try and do it in a way to where we are still preserving anything and everything that we would be required to do so. However, you know, safety is, to me, is the most important thing. Anything that's ordinary maintenance or repair of a property or structure, including any public infrastructure that does not involve a change in any element of design and that does not have an impact that is greater than that of the original construction. So essentially what that means, let's say for instance, and I was supposed to put pictures in here and I didn't because I forgot, but sorry, Sylvia. Anyway, so basically what that means is that just because something is within our historical district doesn't mean that people can't do what they want with that, right? What that means is they have to preserve the original state of how that building was on the outside, right? So somebody driving by sees that building, right? Let's say originally it was something else and they want to use it as offices, right? There's nothing that says that they're not able to use or remodel the interior of that building and use it for something else as long as the outside of that building and the look of it is preserved in the original manner of which it was built, right? So that's kind of a big misconception that a lot of people have. They think, oh, if this is in the historical district, we can't do anything with this. Well, that's not the case. You know, for instance, there was a building downtown here that somebody was wanting to do that with, right? And they wanted to put energy efficient windows in this building, right? Well, as long as the appearance of those windows that are being installed are of the original appearance, they're allowed to do so. Meaning windows with wood framing and things like that, that type of thing has to still be in place. But that doesn't mean that they can't install the new energy efficient windows, right? So those are some things that we look at, to where if what it's gonna look like is what it looks like right now, we don't need to talk about it, right? So that's kind of a decision that is made at the administrative level, as opposed to every time something like this comes up, us having to meet, us having to discuss and things like that, right? Now, if there was something else that they wanted to be changed that is still within that era, and they're wanting to change the aesthetic look of something, you know, that's the type of thing that would have to come before the commission to be discussed on whether it's still going to preserve that heritage or whatever it is that's in line there. That make sense?
Question.
Answer. Don't forget to talk in your mic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if the,
Get a little closer.
okay.
Thank you, sir.
It's my understanding that buildings that are on the National Registry,
Mhm.
that as you describe, it cannot be, the appearance of the building as it, theoretically, as it was when it was first built, or when it was put on the National Registry, that can't be changed. But they can, in fact, change. You could do anything on the inside. You could gut the inside and do anything you wanted with it, on the inside. You seem to be saying that if they want to do something with the building that retains not necessarily the exact look, but the appearance of the style and time, is that permissible?
So that's not for me to say whether it is or isn't permissible. That is something that would have to come before the commission, and the commission is going to give their recommendation on how this proceeds forward. From there, as staff, we would then move this up the chain, right? And the city council is who is going to make that final decision. Okay, so let's kind of talk about one of the points that you brought up. The National Historical Registry is very different from our historical overlay district. Now, there may be some buildings and things that are on the National Registry that are within our historical district, but outside of that, we don't have anything to say about any of those other buildings. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't bring something forward and give a recommendation to then pass on to the state or anything like that. That doesn't mean that. But as far as what we really have any say in are things that are within our historical overlay district, right? So our rules may be a little different from what the state is saying has to happen, or the federal government says that has to happen on their stuff. And also there's nothing really that's prohibiting anything that's on the National Registry from becoming a part of our overlay district, right? Our overlay district doesn't have to be all in one area. We can have one single piece of property a part of our overlay district, right? And those are some of the things moving forward that we will be discussing and we will be looking into, and possibly doing some comparisons with that, and really getting our communication with the, who are they? Those one people. It's way back up here. The State Historical Preservation Officer and any other government agencies. So essentially the National Parks. National Parks is where the division of historical preservation is with the state in those national buildings and things that are on the National Historical Registry. Those are some of the things that we do need to look at, and we do need to choose whether or not we want those as part of our overlay.
I have a question.
Okay?
What would trigger a property needing to come before the commission? Is there a percent of change that a building's going to make? Because I don't know if the commission's ever seen a property come in front of it. And I know there has been several properties changed within the historic district.
So again, that's something that the historical preservation officer looks at. I know that there is a project occurring right now that we didn't bring before the historical preservation because the plan of what they're doing with the building is returning that building back to its original state, right? Or very, very close to. So that's what our overall goal is. So the thing that comes into play is why do we need to talk about it? Because that's what's happening, right?
Right.
So that's the next portion of, hey, what does trigger that, right? So we can just jump to that.
Sorry,
I have
before,
a follow-up question.
Okay.
Could we, even if there isn't any discussion, could that be an agenda item just so everyone is aware of these projects?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And there should be. And
Thank
I'll
you.
tell you right now, that is it's my fault. I was kind of trying to swim above water. So absolutely is stuff that we do need to be doing in the future. As we move forward, we will be doing. It will be hey, just so you know, this is happening, and if there is any discussion or whatever, you obviously can have that. But that was one of those things that the code didn't require it. Time was of the essence on a lot of it because it was borderline becoming a safety issue. So it was something that we kind of just had moved forward. So absolutely, 100% agree on that, and we will definitely do that.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Okay.
When you had said that it's a work in progress to look at expanding and reviewing the district, is there a timeline in that? Is there a goal of having it done, for instance, in the next 6 months or something to be able to say?
That
'cause-
that is something that will have to be discussed by the commission on a separate agenda item.
Okay.
So again, coming forward again, that definitely would have to be something, because it really truly isn't us that decides this. It's you who makes your recommendation, and then we take that to the powers that be for that to happen.
That makes
That
sense.
makes
So it's,
sense.
and it sounds like what you're conveying here is that time is of the essence, and that is something that we would need to look
Very
at.
much so, very much so. And kind of the topic that we were talking about before was time was of the essence in that particular situation that I'm talking about, because it was becoming a safety issue. And in order for it to not become an issue and put anybody, it was a decision that I made the decision. I'm the one that said, no, absolutely, we are going to do this, because without a shadow of a doubt, you have proved to me that what you're going to do is returning this building back to before any changes were made back when it was originally built. Basically the historical preservation officer may review and approve or conditionally approve in the following situations. So cultural resource studies, and that are letter reports, meaning one of the things we'll have to do is we'll have to have a survey done throughout our city, and then based upon the results of that survey, we're gonna have to choose what we're gonna do, right? And again, we're not going to be able to do everything overnight. This is something that we're gonna have to build on and expand and move in a manner that is essentially affordable, right? So that's something to keep in mind. These are things that we have had some very, very preliminary discussions on doing, so stuff that's been in the plan, I would say, since 2021, but with staffing all the way around the whole city and funds and all these different things, it's not something that we've pushed forward, but that is something that's on the horizon, and we're looking to do so. The historical preservation officer can issue a certificate of no effect for minor work that has a limited impact in relation to the total cultural resource. So basically, it would include any conforming signs, excluding any comprehensive sign programs. There are no current sign programs really in place, but we do have a building facade program that's in place, right? And luckily, those that have come in, it goes back to the whole window situation. They were wanting to change windows, right? There is going to be no effect, right? So we would issue that certificate of no effect and move forward with the project, because remember that when you're doing projects like that, time is money, right? And us having to bring this forward to the Heritage Preservation Commission and talk about it and things like that, that's costing these people money, right? That time delay is costing them money. Money that may make the difference on whether or not they're able to even do the project or not. So, a remodel, addition, deck, or porch that does not expand the floor area or any outdoor activity area by more than 10% or 200 square feet. An accessory structure that is not more than the lesser of 10% of the main building's footprint or 400 square feet. Minor alterations such as storefront windows or doors, other fenestrations, awnings, shutters, gutters, porch rails, accessible features and facilities, paint colors, lighting, roofing, fencing, retaining walls, walkways, driveways, or landscaping. Demolition or removal of inappropriate features that are non-original, including any types of additions, accessory structures, and structures that are not cultural resources. Modification to support systems, like anything that's like mechanical, electrical, satellite dishes, and things of that nature. As long as they are properly sited and screened as per what the zoning code requires. And then any matter that the Heritage Preservation Commission refers to the Historical Preservation Officer for approval. So that's something also to keep in mind, is that obviously this relationship is going to be a very close relationship with this commission and historical preservation. I'm going to say the historical preservation officers, because there'll be a lot of us that have our hands into this. But keep in mind that if the commission is struggling with something or anything when it comes to place and making a decision, right, you can always refer it back to the historical preservation officers, right? And it's something that, who knows what it is. You can give your opinions, you can say all these things, but if it's difficult for a consensus or recommendation to come into play, that can be one of your recommendations. And that really is all I have. There's a lot of good questions here. Are there any other questions? Keep in mind, based upon what our city attorney presented to us, it's not really based upon this topic. I'm going to defer you to create it as an agenda item and talk about it as an agenda item in a meeting.
Does the city currently have plans to expand the overlay district?
That's a very good question. So I will say this: the city has had plans to survey and bring it to the commission for that decision to be made and start working on that and making progress on that. However, there were things that have each year have come up, because granted, you have to realize in doing the survey, the cost of that is a lot of money, right? And when there's other things like, for instance, the general plan, right? The general plan, by state statute, we are required to do an update on that every 10 years. Well, that just so happened to be this year. So the amount of money that costs to do that, absolutely could have tried to bring this survey or something like this forward. However, looking at trying to be financially responsible and things like that, it was something that didn't make it through. coming up in future years was some of the things I foresee us being able to move forward with this, because this actually was something that was supposed to occur in 2022, right after the planning and zoning update was completed and went into effect in 2021. So we're getting off to, I would say, a slow start, but a lot of that had to do with city finances and some of the different things of, at that point, we were coming out of the COVID time, which that was a big hit to our budget. But I see things moving forward to where projects and things that would be coming forth through the Heritage Preservation Commission, and things like getting this survey completed, because there are things out there that I'm sure none of us know about, right? And we want to make sure it's an all-inclusive report in what it is we want to move forward and try and make a part of us preserving.
If commissioners have questions about properties they see work going on, for example, who can they call? You?
I would say you can always call. You can always call. However, depending upon what the project is and what's going on with it, you may be referred to our economic development team. May say, okay, hey, this is something our director needs to talk to you about. But at any point in time, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Email is the best way. But keep in mind, when you're sending emails, make sure they're direct and you're not including all the members, because that would be a violation of the open meeting laws and things like that.
Question about, to go back to the preservation, the area that you've already defined as the preservation area, that it ends at 4th Street, starts at 1st Street, it ends at 4th Street. So it does not, and it appears to me that it only goes up to Beale Street. It does not go farther, that would be farther north of that.
Correct.
So it, for example, does not include the Benelli House, it does not include the jail, it does not include the
That is absolutely
the
correct.
courthouse and so forth.
Yes.
Now, the courthouse, I understand, belongs to the county, so there's not much the city can do with that.
Again, ownership isn't something that, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, because it absolutely does matter. Because it does take a vote to the public for any type of expansion of the overlay district. So it would be up to the people as a whole, not necessarily Mojave County.
Okay. Then now I want to understand what, in that area that is currently runs from 1st to 4th Street. So in that area, does any change to any building require city approval? Or are there buildings within that area that clearly have no particular historical value?
So there are buildings within that area that have no historical value. I will say that. However, when the city gets involved, right, is anytime a permit is required to do the work, right? So there's not a whole heck of a lot when it comes to the building department that doesn't require a permit, right? So any major change to the exterior of something, like say if it's stone, right, and somebody wanted to go cover that with stucco, right, that's something we're going to look at. That's something we're going to definitely look at. I mean, we could go on with a whole bunch of this. Keep in mind too, we're not going to catch absolutely everything, but we're going to catch the major things. We're going to catch the major things.
I have a question.
Okay.
It sounds like, it might be a question on procedure, but it sounds like a couple of the things that you brought up, the changes to some of the buildings and also the possible expansion of the overlay district, these should be items for on our agenda in the future? How do we go about doing that? Do we make a motion, or does someone, like from you, to say, I'd like to
So-
come and talk about it?
So later on in the meeting on the agenda, there should be a section of where the chairperson is going to ask the commission, is there any other comment, or are there any other agenda items to request? And then based upon that, the commission members will say what they want the agenda item to be or what they want the discussion to be. Staff will heed those requests. Keep in mind, those things may not always come back on the very next agenda, because it kind of depends upon what it takes. Because a lot of times as staff, we can see what it is you're wanting to do or what it is you're wanting to discuss with that item. So obviously we want to come to you prepared with the research and the information that you really are requesting or wanting as fast as we can, and it may not be by the next meeting. So, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Announcements by commission members, limited to announcements, availability, or attendance at conferences, seminars, requests for agenda items for future meetings, and requests for reports from staff. No discussion on any of these items.
Well, obviously, I would like to request that we consider for a future agenda item both what I previously mentioned, which is the expansion of the overlay district, and any of the works that are on properties in progress that we may not be aware of that we need additional information on. Be added to the agenda, of course.
I have an announcement. The Heritage Preservation Commission shall be composed of 7 members and shall meet bi-monthly on the 4th Tuesday of January, March, May, July, September, and November at noon.
Nothing today, thank you.
Okay. Any other? Nope. Meeting adjourned.